A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all. Myself Vaibhav. In today's session of automated trading, we are going to continue to work with the awesome oscillator, with which we have been developing this algorithm for past week. In today's session, we will try to complete the remaining part of the buy side and of course the sell side. And these are the indicators which we are going to work with, the ATR and the min-max. Let's not go into the details of these indicators as we have already done that. Before we get started, this is a standard disclaimer, and again I would like to remind you that this is simply a tutorial session and no claim is being made regarding the profitability or otherwise of the algorithms which we will be developing during the session. And suppose if you want to use any of the algorithm, I would recommend that you do extensive trial runs for many months and even years, and also let it keep running on the demo account to get a good idea of how efficient it is and how it executes the trades in the real time. And of course, nothing in the webinar is to be constructed as an advice to trade or for any particular setup. Let's get started. Before we go into the J4X platform build up, this is simply a reminder, and the idea has been that we look for sell trade during the time when the awesome oscillators negative values are falling, and buy trade when the awesome oscillators positive values are rising. So those are the times in which the algorithm will be taking trades, and no trades are made when the positive values are falling or when the negative values are rising. And we use the ATR on the daily time frame chart. So we will be using the last day's ATR value. So if today the algorithm is going to take any trade, it will check the yesterday's ATR value and it will then trade accordingly. It will do calculations whenever the ATR is required using yesterday's value. We have defined the ATR using shift 1. Coming to the 1 hourly chart, the requirement is that of course the negative values should be falling, but one more condition is only during the first 6 hours of the new trend reversal we are going to look for the sale trade. So here you can see that trading would have happened during these 4 hours, and then I think it will depend how the algorithm is calculating for time values, not for all 6 hours, maybe around 4 hours the trading will happen. And for the buy trade, similarly the trading would happen only during first 6 hours when the values are rising, and for that we have defined the prior values using shift 6 and shift 7, which also we check. So 6 hours back, if the current conditions are in the sell side, then 6 hours back the value should have been on the positive side, or if the conditions were still negative, then the negative value should have been rising. Only in this scenario the new trades are allowed to happen using the other conditions as well. And then as I said, the ATR requirement is also there, but it is on the daily time frame chart. And one more condition is that last hour candle close should be in the red, that is the closing value should be below the opening value for a sell side trade to happen, and for a buy side trade to happen the last candle close should be in the green, meaning the candle close is above the candle open. So that was the requirement. On top of that, we have also brought in the min-max conditions. So here on the 5-minute chart I will explain. We are using these min-max values of the 48 candle periods of 5 minutes each, and the idea has been that when we are going to go for a buy trade, the value should be rising, and the trade will happen using the 10 seconds historical candle, and we will see that when the value starts to rise above the 20% of the ATR value from the minimum, then only the buy trade will happen. And for a sell trade, when the value starts to fall below the 20% ATR from this maximum value, the sell trade will happen. So we are utilizing those conditions using the calculation expression block. So let's take a look on the Visual J Forex platform how things are looking like. This is the setup so far. So here we have done the standard instrument subscription for Euro USD. Then the position amount has been defined at 0. We have brought in the awesome oscillators for hourly block shift 1 and shift 2 to check whether the values are in the positive territory with rising tendency, or vice versa for the sell trade. Then again we are also going to use the similar requirement for hourly chart. So here these are awesome oscillator blocks using the shift 1 shift 2 on the hourly blocks on the hourly candle period. Then we are going to use the ATR values of the yesterday shift 1, and these are historical values to see how the candle has closed last hourly candle. And then these are again hourly oscillator blocks for shift 6 and shift 7, that is the 6 hours back how the price action was there. Then these are ATR requirement which we will be utilizing while doing the calculation. And this is the min max condition. Here you can see that time period is 48 multiplied by 5 minutes, it will be 240 minutes, 4 hours. So 4 hours, we have two conditions set on the min max. First is that the difference between the minima and the maxima for last 4 hours should be more than 30% of the ATR. So whatever is the daily average true range, we are making sure that volatility should be there, and at least in last 4 hours the price should have moved more than 30% of the ATR. Then as I said while explaining on the chart, we are also going to calculate the entry points using the minima and the maxima values along with the ATR range of 20%. So here these are the calculation. This is the min max difference calculation, and this is I think it is FV has been defined at 30% as I said, and we will be comparing this MMD to EV to make sure that the MMD should be higher than or equal to EV, that is 30% of the ATR, and then this 10 seconds historical candles. Now coming to these are ask, and we will be using the ask values for the sell trade and the bid values for the buy trade. Then these are the calculations required for determining the entry point for buy and the sell, and this is the ATR into 0.2, that is 20% of the ATR. Coming to the if conditions, we have defined that the positive values should be rising and the positive value should be above the zero value. Here also same thing. Then we have defined that the last candle close should be more than the open, that means the hourly candle has closed in green, and here the same thing, the min max difference should be more than the 30% of the ATR. And to make sure that in times of undue volatility the trading should stop, we have defined that the minima should not be less than the prior minima, and we have brought in this condition, it should be equal or greater than the minima. And similarly also for the current one is shift 3 and one is at shift 12, that is 15 minutes back, and shift 12 is 60 minutes back, and on both this count the requirements will need to be fulfilled. And then here it comes to now the current requirements, and as it is no, it is not for the current requirement, it is for the 6 hours back. These values have been defined using shift 6 and shift 7. So when the buy trade has to happen, as I said, either the negative values should be rising or the positive values should be falling. And then these are the entry points. The candle close should be above the buy execution difference, and the prior candle, the candle prior to the last candle, should be less than the execution difference. And when the last candle closes above the execution difference, the buy trade will happen. So it is shift 2 and it is shift 1, the penultimate candle and then the last candle. Now here we will need to define only two conditions. The same thing, we again bring in the candle close values and the buy execution difference. So let's take the values from the setup. And once we are done with the buy side, we can shift our energies on the sell side. So let us take these, we will need to take the bid values. We are going to compare the candle close on the bid side. And here also the requirement is same. The candle which closed 2 candle periods back should have been less than the execution price. So here we bring this, we have to utilize the candle close. So we will take the candle close. I was making a silly mistake there. Auto created variable, and that is candle 40. So we are going to compare the candle 40's closing. So here is the candle close, and also for the candle 41, again we need to take the candle 41's close. So here is the candle close. Yes, we are good. And now we go to the buy execution difference. So here we remember that the shift 1 is candle 41 and the shift 2 is candle 40. Now going to the calculation expression involving the buy entry price. So here it is. Now once we add these blocks, our job will be done for the buy side, and then we will be able to move on to building the sell side. And of course we also have to define the range, the stop loss and the target. For that again we will go back on the chart to see what should be the optimum entry point and the exit points. So here we want the positive values to have been falling 6 hours back. So these are the requirement, and then this is the candle 41 is the last candle, so we want it to be greater, the candle closing should be above, the by execution difference, and the candle 40's value should have been less. So here we are. Candle 40's close is less than the by execution difference. Candle 40 is shift 2. Okay, so we are done with the buy side now. Let us save the file for the work we have done so far. Now again we turn our attention to working on the sell side, as we want our algorithm to be symmetric. So all the conditions which we have put in for the buy side, we will need the inverse of the same conditions. So everything will remain the same, only the trajectory will be exactly opposite. So now again we go back to the prior blocks. And there we will be comparing the values of the awesome oscillators 4 hourly block, and then 1 hourly, then of the 1 hourly but 6 and 7 hours back. So we are going to rely on the historical data as well. So here we are, 4 hourly blocks first. We want the negative values to be falling for the sell side. So we bring in this requirement. The negative values, we are going to compare the shift 1 with the shift 2, and it should be, first input should be less than the second input. And again, one more thing is, yes, it's good. Let me check on the buy side as well. If we had taken the, yes, it looks good. And then we also want the negative value here to be less than 0. So we have done the condition for the 4 hour. Now we need to do the similar setup for hourly chart. First we compare the current values, and the requirement is the same. Shift 1 negative value should be less than shift 2's negative value. So here we are. We now again bring in further if blocks. Let us connect this so that we don't miss on the required logic. It should be less, so it is going to be less. And then the negative value, negative 17, should be less than the negative 18. So again we add that here. So far so good. negative 17 and the negative 19. Okay, now we have done this. Now for the requirement is going to add the required calculations. So I think we should first arrange this and connect. Before that, let us also compare the candle close, if it has closed in red or not. So the candle close should be less than the candle open, and here we are going to use the ask values, and we will be comparing the candle 24's closing and the opening values. So we go to the candle 24 and the candle 24's close should be less than the candle open. So here we connect the first input less than the second input. So we have added these many requirements. Now we will need to see and compare the awesome oscillators values 6 hours back. So before we add those conditions, let us take all these blocks to where they belong and connect them to the multiple action. And once we are done with this, we will compare the 6 hours back values and of course the minima and the maxima difference, which we have said that the difference between the minima and the maxima should be more than the 30% of the ATR. So we will do that. Now let us connect this to here. So the flow has started now. We are essentially back in business. Okay. We will make sure that our algorithm is totally symmetric. So all the conditions which we have put in while defining the buy entry should be there for the sell side too, just in an inverse fashion. All the requirements should be inverted. So here we have put in the conditions. Now let us make sure that the min-max difference is more than the EV execution value, and again we bring in more if blocks. we have got the new if blocks to look on the min max values. We want the maxima. While the buy side we were looking at the minimum values, now the maximum values are of greater importance. Let us connect this requirement. We want the min-max difference to be more than the 30% of the ATR, so we connect this on the greater side. Okay, so we are done with this block. Now let us define two more requirements. And let us check for the min-max values, the maximals, maxima on the high side on the ask. So let me check. No, this is the bid and the low. Okay, these are the required blocks, ask side and the high price. And it is the current maxima value. We will compare the current maxima to the maxima 15 minutes back. So here again we want it to be equal, means it shouldn't be too much volatility, shouldn't have been made a new high in last 15 minutes. So we want the flat maximum values, and where are, oh, it is here. Okay, and we compare the current maximum value to also 1 hour back, and here is the maximum value, shift 0 and shift 12 1 hour back, and this time the maxima should be equal to or less than the maximum value 1 hour back. So first let us do this. We want the maxima to be equal, and then we want that to be equal to or less than the maxima 36 is the one defined using shift 12. Okay, so far so good. Let us get these blocks back where they belong, and then we will be free to check for the values last 6 hours back. So here we put this value, and then we add these values, okay. So far we have done the necessary adjustment as per our requirements. So we have built this algorithm so far, but now we will need to add the multiple action side, multiple action blocks, and then our algorithm will be almost finished. But as we see, we are running short on time, so we will need to complete the work tomorrow, and again I will be back, and tomorrow we will add the remaining requirements, and then do the test run to see how the trades are getting executed. And suppose if we want to make any changes, we want to further optimize it, we can do that as well. So thank you all for joining in. Have an excellent time ahead. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.